I do want to announce to everyone who is in the audience and who is tuning in the great leaders in our community who have taken the time out of their schedules to be here. First, I want to say a great thank you for our politicians who are here, including Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon, Senator Tim Kearney, Senator Anthony Williams, Representative Mike Zabel, Representative Dave Deloso, Representative Jen O'Mara, Representative Joanna McClinton, who I know will be tuning in shortly with us, and Representative Leanne Kruger, as well as our wonderful County Councilwoman, Dr. Monica Taylor. I also want to thank our 2 police officers who are in attendance today. I know one superintendent of the police department, Upper Darby, Timothy Bernhardt, is unfortunately going to be running a little late due to a police emergency, but he will be in attendance shortly after that situation is dealt with. I also want to thank State Trooper Jessica Toplin, who is originated from media. I greatly appreciate your police presence and being able to tune in to this conversation. I also want to thank all the schools and their students and the administrators who took the time out of their summer vacation to be here and talk about what the school year should look like for next year during these circumstances. And out of the 15 schools in Delaware County that we've reached out to, we have been able to get a student from 9 of those schools. So I really want to appreciate all those students and all those school administrators who took out the time of their summer vacation to be in this conversation. I know our poet is here and she is present, and I want to send in her to read her beautiful poem about what being a young Black person is like during this time.
Actually, if I may, for a moment, as of right now, it has been 8 minutes and 46 seconds since the start of this forum when it started recording. We chose to hold this forum on this day specifically because it has been 1 month since the killing of George Floyd, which has started conversations nationwide and in some cases worldwide regarding racial injustice. So I'd like to just take a brief moment to acknowledge that while we exchange words and discuss policy, there have been people who've been losing their lives. And that is what, in whatever scale we can, we are seeking to help address.
Unfortunately, due to time constraints, I want to be considerate of everyone's time, and hopefully towards the end of this conversation, we will be able to hear Miss Johnson's poem. But for now, I want to start moving on to our wonderful students who were able to participate today. So I want to introduce you to the student who is representing Upper Darby, and his name is Chris, and he can begin telling his story now.
Hello, my name is Chris. I'm from Upper Darby. I'm going to be a senior. So Upper Darby is home to a prodigious amount of culture, and it resides in over 100 ethnic groups, placing Upper Darby High School in the top 5 most diverse public high schools in Pennsylvania. With such an honorary title that Upper Darby abundantly prides itself on, one could assume the students of color would face little to none racism, but such allegations are far-fetched from the ringing truth. Because I have been enrolled in the school district since kindergarten, along with my experiences and those of my peers, I can speak accordingly to such according matters. So, being an immigrant from Ivory Coast, also known as Côte d'Ivoire, it was from the early age of 6 that I had to face an additional barrier from societal acceptance other than the color of my skin, and that happened to be the English language. Little did I know that learning another language would be the least of my problems in the foreseeable future. Going to elementary school, I spoke English fluently, and once my teachers realized I not only possessed but exceeded the skills of ELA, math, science, etc., things that many perceive immigrants and non-speaking English members to lack, I was tested and admitted into the gifted program. Being the only student in the gifted program at the time, later to be joined by another Black student. I was bused to another elementary school where the students were predominantly white, where I was the only Black student in the program, and even though only in second grade, I knew why. Everyone used to stare at me as I walked in the hallways and as I boarded the bus. I was the only Black student in the whole entire school bus. This continued until middle school, where a vast majority of the school was Black students of people of color. In order to understand the racism in Upper Darby, you must start with the acknowledgement of its divided neighborhoods. The district is segregated and truly reflects in the two middle schools, Beverly Hills and Drexel Hill Middle School. Anyone who attends Upper Darby knows the bad reputation that precedes Beverly Hills Middle School. The school is seen as the lesser of the two middle schools, constantly portrayed with its vice and troubled disciplinary students. When I arrived at high school, where both middle schools are integrated, it was obvious the negative connotation that was followed by the students who attended Beverly Hills. The white students from Drexel Hill Middle School, the other middle schools, said things as, "I can't believe you went to that school," or "How many fights have you been in?" repeatedly associating the school and its students with terms ghetto and ratchet. As if experiencing deja vu, I again faced with being the only few Black students in my classes. With a school of over 3,800 students, where 50% of the student body is African American students, with approximately 900 students in my class of 2021, it is disquieting and quietly devastating the number of Black students in the higher level classes. For context, in my Honors Calculus BC class I took this past school year, there were a total of 3 Black students in the class and approximately 20 people. In my AP Chemistry class, there were 5 Black students out of 30. My AP US History class, 3 out of 25. And that happened to be the case for every single one of my core classes. How is it that even when I am not a minority in a school full of people of color, I am in my classes? Attending Upper Darby High School as a Black student, it is as if there's a target on your back. The consequences for having pigmentation and a higher dose of melanin have resulted in a constant side-eye and constant amounts of microaggression. When walking in the hallways during the non-transitional period, the chances of a Black person being stopped and asked, "Where is your pass?" is higher than if a white person was to do so. The Black students at Upper Darby seem to be the only ones who are affected by the disciplinary system and a code of conduct. Things that white people get rewarded with a warning and a slap on the wrist, Black students have to endure the full consequences. When a white girl is to break the dress code, she is considered adventurous with her sense of style. But once a Black girl wears a crop top or a shorter-sized skirt, she is met with a call home and a detention. The security and the staff make it so Black students are treated like they are a danger or a threat to the school. Because God forbid a Black student is to wait anywhere outside or inside the school after school, because they are viewed as loitering and they are urged to be pushed off campus. But if it was to be a white student, the security automatically assumes that they are waiting for a parent or they are part of some sport or activity, things that many Black students contribute to. The sports at Upper Darby are just as segregated as the district itself, with the Black students playing stereotypical sports such as basketball, track, and football, and the white students playing baseball, swimming, and cheerleading. How is it that we are supposed to be a school that is united when the coaches seem to be biased towards who they deem fit to join their sports? But even with all its flaws, I love Upper Darby, and given the endless opportunity, I would never feel the need to transfer schools. With that being said, there is a plenitude of things that we can improve, making our learning environment a safer space for all students. It is all my years of education at Upper Darby that I have had only 2 Black teachers, and both happen to be in elementary school. With a school district that is such a diverse community, why is that not reflected in the staff? White kids have grown up seeing people they know, people they look like on TVs, movies, shows, and commercials. They have a role model to look up to. And as a Black boy, I do not have that luxury. I do not have any Black superheroes, and none of my teachers look like me. I have no one who I felt comfortable to talk to about these matters. Upper Darby has got to improve their teacher demographic, hiring more Black teachers, and also other people of color. It seems that the only time you see a Black staff member is during maintenance or as a bus driver. Along with an increase of Black students, there is a compelling call for a change in the curriculum. Slavery does not suffice Black history. The reason for ignorance is the lack of knowledge. When learning about history from a textbook written by white men, the content is biased and leaves out the perspective of the opposing side. Therefore, we need more Black literature. And I understand these things will take time and cannot change in a day, but much like the boycotts that launched the civil rights movement, we have to start somewhere. Racism resides where it is tolerated, and once the school realizes the issue of discrimination, actions must be taken place to end them. The question I proceed to ask you is one that may or may not be answered, but is directed to the entire forum. Is this call just going to be another meeting that you check off your busy schedule, or is it something that you're going to use? And Razily, what are you going to personally do to help dismantle the system that currently is hurting endless number of students? Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your story, Chris. And if anyone wants to answer Chris's question, now is the time to do so.
Hi, it's Mary Gay. Thank you for your testimony, Chris. It's really powerful. And the fact that folks are speaking out and providing that kind of testimony is what's giving us the political power right now to try to make some changes. I just got back from debate on the House floor, which is going to be going on for the next 4 hours. So if you have nothing else to do, you can go to C-SPAN and watch debate on the House floor all afternoon about the George Floyd Justice and Police bill. And we're going to be voting on that later tonight. So, you know, it's the fact that people are having these kinds of sessions and are making their voices heard that is really giving us the ability to do something. The George Floyd bill is made up of bills that have been introduced in the House for years now. But it's the fact that people have come to the streets and a lot of America has woken up to what's actually going on, that, you know, that realizing the reality that right now we've got this opportunity to try to make some changes. So thank you for organizing this, and thank you for your collective voices. It's really important, and it helps us tell stories, you know, when we're representing. So thank you.
If we have one more official who, if you want to answer Chris's question, specifically a school administrator, now is the time to do so, because I'm sure Chris has questions about how schools are going to take on this conversation.
I can answer from a school administrator standpoint. My name is Steve Brandt, principal of Garnet Valley High School. Chris, first of all, please allow me to commend you on having the courage to speak up and share your perspective. You did a wonderful job articulating your point of view and your experiences. And obviously, from a personal standpoint, I'm sorry to hear that that's the experience that you've encountered. But I can only speak on Garnet Valley and kind of what we're doing. So obviously, you know, racism permeates every neighborhood, every community, and we would be naive to think that any community is immune to that. And you know, from our perspective, I guess probably about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a pretty bad situation. So our superintendent was very proactive and started a global citizenship committee to kind of look at different issues, you know, systemic, you know, relating to race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and so forth. So I know that as a district, we are continuing that work. We also are very blessed that we started, our student body started a club a few years ago called HERE, and the acronym stands for Humanity in Ethnicity, Race, and Equality. And that student voice has been very critical in our work, providing you know, perspective from our students, and then also kind of coming up with some wonderful ideas. And I have Nisheda Thomasell with me today, who's phenomenal. Nisheda, if you want to give a little wave. All right. She's one of our officers, and we met, I guess last week, was it, Nisheda? All right, to discuss some ideas, and some of the ideas that our students had, because at the end of this day, besides the adults, the students are a critical component and a critical voice in this work. So that they had shared probably over a dozen different you know, ideas to kind of get the word out, to bring awareness and voice you know, to these efforts. Just some of the ideas were microaggression poster projects where they would hang microaggressions, you know, through the school. We've kind of talked about it, you know, actually supporting and kind of, you know, buying frames to put them up on the walls. and to preserve the artwork that's going to go with them, and just have that voice up on the wall to kind of just remind people of the microaggressions that are out in our society. They had suggested adding stuff to the back of stalls, just because messages, that everyone uses the restrooms at some point in the daytime. All right. And again, it just increasing the frequency of messages, and exposing students to important topics, such as race and equality in a casual and an effective way. Some of the other things, our HERE group goes in and talks to our High School 101, which is a freshman mandated course around transitioning. But they go in and talk about, race, ethnicity in our building. They talk about and broach the topic of white privilege, and really just get people to kind of, reflect on the things that plague our society, but also more importantly, affect the students within the Garnet Valley community. Certainly we need to look at things that we're doing with curriculum. So one thing that we're doing is we're adding a youth court this coming school year. And part of that course and that class is going to focus on the justice system, the history of the justice system, and some of the biases, that unfortunately occur within the justice system. And those students will help us with implementing some discipline. All right. And obviously with any discipline, we want that discipline to be, we want it to be corrective, not just punitive. All right. And obviously we want it to be fair across the board for all students. We did talk about, introducing some Black literature, some additional Black literature into our curriculum, celebrating Heritage Months. I'm just going through my list now. So, all right. Holding conferences with our students of color, doing things with our newsletter and putting messages in our newsletters just to kind of keep the conversation in the forefront of our community, bringing guest speakers in, doing workshops and presentations with our parents. And I know a couple of years ago, we brought in Amanda Kemp from Franklin and Marshall University. She's a professor in sociology and social justice to speak within our community. And then doing things like Multicultural Day to celebrate the wonderful diversity that we have in our community.
Mr. Brandt, we do have to move on.
Yep, not a problem. All right. So that's just some of the things that Garnet Valley is doing.
My name is Nate Robinson, principal of Academy Park High School. Christopher, thank you for sharing your story and all the information that you provided. I would like to say I'm just proud of this generation in regards to being proactive and making your voice be heard. And Chris, I think that's a continued, that's part of the process. Open dialogue, open conversations, and people just being transparent and honest with each other. As far as at Academy Park High School, we have some organizations and programs that our students take advantage of. We have our PBIS program. We also have restorative practices, and that's an opportunity. Those are opportunities to have those open dialogue conversations. And our students take advantage of having their voice being heard. Whether that's through a poetry. So we have a poetry team called Poetic 101. And very often they touch on issues that revolve around discrimination or the civil rights movement, and just different challenges that different groups have faced as far as discrimination. So we look to continue providing those outlets for our students in the form of assemblies, having guest speakers, because it's very important to have that your voice be heard and demonstrate that power through your voice. And Chris, I commend you for being open and sharing your story. As an African-American man myself, I'll be turning 48 this Saturday. And sadly, a lot of things that are going on today, it's nothing new. And right now we need to continue taking advantage of the momentum and keep pushing forward to make a change.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. I believe we now have another student who is being brought up, Myra Patel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mira Patel, and I'm a rising senior at Strathaven High School. So I moved to the district in 9th grade. So all of my experiences in the district have been since then. And since that time, over these past few years, I've had the opportunity to be a part of a number of different organizations. And one of those is Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon's Youth Congressional Cabinet. And another would be the High School Democrats of Pennsylvania. So through both of these groups, I've had the chance to interact with tons of students from across the state, and it's been really refreshing to hear what their districts are doing well and what sometimes we see as a common thread of what we're missing in all of our schools. So just a little about the town I live in. So I live in Swarthmore and I go to Strathaven High School. It is a predominantly white school, and in December of 2018, we had this hate crime attack. And so basically, these girls left signs on residents' doors stating anti-immigrant rhetoric. And a lot of it stemmed from political rhetoric that has been spreading through our country. And so that incident kind of opened my eyes as to the fact that students are becoming politically aware these days. Whether it's through news, whether it's through social media, we have this understanding of what's happening in our communities and in our country. And although that was an example of an unfortunate incident that happened, something that I think previous speakers mentioned that I'm also very proud to say is that my generation is open to having discussions. We are speaking out about the things that are important to us, whether it's racially related issues, social justice issues. We are using our voices. But the one place I am not seeing open dialogue is in the classroom. And so an example of this that I've been thinking a lot about is how we're taught history. And for an example, it's the civil rights movement, right? So we're taught the civil rights movement with no connection to present day police brutality, present day issues that are happening, that is the 2020 civil rights movement. So that is something that I would definitely like to see teachers be equipped with the resources to have these conversations with us. Because like I said, I think we are at that point where we are aware of what's happening. And so a good friend of mine, Aaliyah Brooke Sims, she started this club at my school called the Youth Activist Coalition. They are doing lots of great things in our community to promote and raise awareness for social justice related issues. She wanted me to share this question with the panel because she cannot be here today. So this is what she wanted me to bring up. The Philadelphia School District recently implemented a mandatory African American history course in their high schools. It has provided a space in schools to discuss race while providing a more accurate depiction of American history and the economic and social inequities that continue to impact all people of color today. How can we bring this course to our schools? I know that there's a number of petitions going around in Delaware County and Montgomery County that students are bringing up to their administrators that, we would like to see an African American history course implemented because of this lack of discussion. So that would be our question to the panel.
I would like to answer, at least on the legislator side, before a school administrator talks. So first of all, Mira, I just want to thank you for your very eloquent words. I'm a state legislator that got elected in 2018, but I'm a certified social studies teacher, grades 7 through 12 in Pennsylvania. And I agree with you that education can be a very good place for students to have difficult discussions, and I'm really proud of all of the students who are on here. As a legislator, I have looked at my role as sort of a combination between being a legislator and an educator. I try to talk about difficult issues with my constituents. Knowing I represent a predominantly white district, I try to talk about issues that may be uncomfortable, but that I think I can facilitate given my position. Recently, it's been a little bit more challenging because I can't have in-person events where I want to schedule town halls and talk about these things, but I'm working on doing that virtually. But I did compile a book list that I sent out to my constituents on social media and through an email because I thought that would be a good way to suggest people to read. And I put books on there that might make you uncomfortable just by the title, but that I think would challenge people. As a legislator, I am happy to look into, I'm not on the education committee, but I know some people on this call are, and I can look into what we can do in terms of changing curriculum through legislation. We're at a unique time where colleagues on both sides of the aisle are unable to avoid listening to the voices in the streets and the voices that you all are bringing out. And just yesterday, we passed bipartisan, unanimous legislation in Harrisburg that would bring police reforms to police departments in Pennsylvania that was supported by the state Fraternal Order of Police and got a unanimous vote. That doesn't happen very often. So I think we're at a time where we could raise this discussion about curriculum. I think it could also be changed at schools. One thing, I talk to the superintendents in my school districts a lot, and I represent Springfield, Marple, Newtown, and Radnor. And I know in Springfield, they make a concerted effort to make sure every student sees themselves in the books that you read, and that the student sees themselves in the protagonists. And I think that could be a challenge that could be administered to all schools in Delaware County, that every student sees themselves as a protagonist in their book lists. So thank you so much for having this discussion, and for all of the students for having us on here to hear from you. Thank you.
Can I jump in? This is Senator Williams. Before the educators speak, I listen kind of intently. Just so you know, I'm of that generation that was part of the civil rights movement. I listened to the young man, I listened to the young lady speak. Thank you for organizing this. And it's always interesting to hear a different perspective. For me, these are not uncomfortable conversations. These are conversations I was raised with. And I guess for some it's new, but for those who don't know, and I'm glad the young lady talked about curriculum, but the truth is there's some basic things that we have to deal with when we deal with racism in this country. That it is not just the person we consider to be the bigot, but we also have people who are oblivious and frankly have a bias. If you look at your school districts and you say you changed the curriculum, but you don't have a person who knows about Black history or African American history, then you can have all the curriculum you want. By the way, there was a mandate 20 years ago that required Black history to be taught in Philadelphia public schools. And it was changed in the General Assembly of Pennsylvania. And people picked it up for 5 minutes and put it down. To make this permanent, frankly, you have to do things like, why are there not more people of color teaching children of color in Philadelphia? The district is overwhelmingly African American, almost 80%, and the population of teachers are significantly different. Now, not to say that white teachers can't teach Black children, but there is something to be said about an example in front of you who knows your history. And so we got to be a little bit more direct. While I appreciate the bills that we passed, yesterday in Harrisburg, they're nowhere near what we need to get done when it comes to getting police officers who should not be police officers. And so if we're going to have conversations that are difficult, we really got to have challenging conversations about race, honest conversations about race with our friends, with colleagues. It starts with economic freedom. Social justice is something we're focusing upon, but economic freedom. There's no reason that so many people of color live below the poverty level in this country. The majority of African Americans now live in America, and they live in poverty. So that doesn't happen simply because there is a bigoted society. It happens because there's a biased society. And so if we're going to attack systemic racism and have these conversations, we got to be looking at each other honestly about what do we need to do to put more skin in the game. When we have interviews, when we have applications, certainly curriculum and history are all part of it, but it really is the space in which we occupy with our friends every day, and we don't realize we carry around these things that will make revolutionary change, starting with these conversations, which are wonderful.
My name is Chris Matsanka. I'm assistant principal actually at Mira's school at Strathaven High School. Again, I just like to thank everyone for putting this together. Chris, thank you for sharing your story. And Mira, thank you for participating and representing our school community. And just to directly answer your question, I'm just going to directly answer your question about the curriculum. There really is no reason that we should not be looking to develop this type of coursework, and not just in our school, but other school districts. For the last few weeks, I can only speak personally. I've been just saddened by the situation. I'm just overwhelmed with sadness. That's the only way, I can really convey my feelings about what's going on in our society, and what's made it even more difficult is the lack of connection with our students right now, given the COVID-19 pandemic. But probably more than anything, what makes me sad, and I think this is kind of piggybacking on what Senator Williams was saying. This is not a new topic. This is not a new issue, and I'm just sad that this is where we're at. The only thing that makes me feel like we're going to move in a positive direction. It just feels like there's a different feeling to what's going on right now. With the generation of people, our generation of kids that are very involved, with what's been going on with the protests and the messaging and this ability for people to rise up right now, given the situation. So as a school administrator, I'm positive. I feel good for probably the first time in 16 or 17 years, however I've been doing this, that we can make a positive change. And I'm a big advocate that, through the study of history, through the study of curriculum, that's just one piece of a very difficult puzzle that we were able to move forward. So, I don't necessarily have a plan for you or facts, but I just wanted to share that with you as well as the everyone that's involved today.
I'm a school board member at the Wallingford Former School District. Thank you for sharing. As a member of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Subcommittee for the board, we are in the process of putting together our community-wide Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, which I think you might be aware of because I think you might have applied for it. The committee will be representative of teachers, administrators, and student voices, and one of the many things we're looking at will be curriculum. We have the Teaching Tolerance Program from the Southern Poverty Law, SPLC. So the Southern Poverty Law Center will be conducting the Teaching Tolerance Program, which has phenomenal materials on how to talk about so many issues that we've been afraid to talk about in the classroom, and I think that we can definitely create a specific course on African American history, but also making sure that it's infused throughout all of the social studies and history coursework that we have at all levels, not just at a high school level. So thank you.
We'll now move on to Tori Monroe, who is from Penwood High School.
Hello. I just wanted to acknowledge first that if you see me looking down or talking off to the side, it's me taking notes and talking to my mom, who's actually a government official, so I'm fully attentive. Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria Monroe, and I transferred from a predominantly white school to Penwood about 2 years ago. I am an upcoming senior, and I plan on studying architectural engineering and Spanish in college, but my passions don't stop there. I'm also interested in performing arts, digital arts, sports, community service, and civil rights, which you've probably seen by my most recent protest in Yaden, which had a very good turnout. William Penn is a predominantly Black school besides one or two schools in the district, so our problems are significantly different from others. However, our school dynamic towards race, culture, and systemic processes need to be improved greatly. Penwood students and I demand changes within our school community in order to have a safer and enhanced high school experience. Our demands include abolishing favoritism towards athletics and academics, as well as fair treatment within all athletics, acknowledging mental health of students, and having accessible, known, and effective help and guidance towards mental health, executing just discipline towards all students, especially with bullying and the dress code, teaching as well as emphasizing the importance and necessity of Black excellence within our community, substituting whitewashed curriculum materials with materials from Black publishers or other people of color that centered around unbiased truths, taught by people of color. More funding towards the Black schools in our district, rather than the schools that have more white people or white students. Not only that, but monitoring and effective spending towards the schools. And lastly, which I think is most important, a policy to ensure that when a student wants something, it would be acknowledged and executed, since we have a reputation of saying things but not following through all the way. Improvements, these are many out of a few improvements our school needs to make, but this is a great start. I encourage schools and their administrators to reach out to students and parents in order to make a safe and constructive school environment. I would also like to advise people to reach out to your local government, as we are doing now, to ensure change. It all starts with the people's voice. If you have questions, please message me in the chat, or I will direct you to alternative ways you can communicate with me. And I leave you with this message: stay aware, stay safe, stay Black, and stay proud.
Thank you, Tori. Do we have any officials, particularly any school admins, but others if they choose, who would like to ask her a question right now regarding what she said?
I'm Ken Acker. I'm the principal over at Ridley High School, and I want to commend, first of all, Chris, Mira, and Tori for their voice and their bravery in terms of communicating to us, the adults, what is so important coming from our students. I also want to thank Charles and Kayla for organizing this. Kayla and I have been talking about this forum for a while. We've created really an opportunity for student voice. But I kind of want to go back and support Senator Williams' conversation about, and it kind of, Tori, goes to what you were talking about. When you're sitting in class and you're looking at the teacher in front of you, you want to see somebody who you relate with or relate to. And it's really important. The problem that we see is that the recruitment of teachers of color or people of color to be in our schools is difficult because we haven't been able to produce a student in our classroom who feels connected to the educational process. Therefore, what we've got to start doing is trying to figure out how we can not recruit more teachers of color, but more students of color to go into the teaching profession. That is part of our concern, is that our students are not connected and seeing what the benefits are to being a teacher. Whether you are a teacher of a person of color or if you're a white student, where is your connection to the environment in which you are learning? So the idea of a forum like this, where we're hearing from students where the gaps are and where the failures of the educational process or the educational environment, to create that connection to learning and to that need of being a teacher to communicate back. I know that's why I became a teacher. I was connected to understanding learning, and I wanted to give back to my community. We need to be able to create that environment for all of our students. So Kayla, I want to again kind of throw the ball in your court, because I know you had mentioned to me about being a student of color who was interested in becoming an educator. That's awesome. How do we do that better? How do we make the environment in the educational world, whether it's a classroom or a school in general, a place where people feel comfortable, and encouraging our students of color to go into that teaching field so that they know there's a place that they can reach all children. And one of the other notes that I jot down as I was listening was, it starts with a student voice. We're trying to give that to our students in Ridley, just like we did after the horrific school shootings that we've had. We've created an opportunity for our kids to not just, and Tori, this goes back to your question, and Chris, I think your question as well, when you asked, well, now what? Just having a conversation is important. However, what's the next step? Part of our process here is to create action plans and to do things and put them in paper and hold people accountable for going about looking at where the change needs to be made and then actually doing a plan. So I thank all of you for being a part of this. And again, those students who are involved here, for the bravery in your voice. It's important that we hear from you because we need to listen. And now we need to act. So again, thank you.
To the students on the panel, I'm a former history teacher, social studies teacher. The reason why I became a history teacher is because I did not like the way that history was taught to me. I did not agree with a whole bunch of memorizing of dates and things along those lines. It was more important to understand and comprehend the issues involved with the different topics in history. And as a former history teacher, I used to open up on the first day with, what's wrong with this scenario? His story. You break down the word history, it's his story. There's an obvious gender bias there. If a man is telling his story, there could also be the cultural biases as well. I would always ask my students, why isn't this called U.S. Her Story? So students, what I'm trying to encourage you to, as Mr. Acker is pointing out to, being an educator can be very, very rewarding. I know you all want to get your money and make business, get your business degrees and all that. But I will say this, I never thought that teaching would lead to where it has led for me today as far as being an administrator. I encourage all of you to consider that as an option because you can make a difference in the classroom. And I certainly did not have, I had very few African-American teachers in elementary school and one in high school. So that is a need in having more diversity across the field as far as the business of education. And I would also like to say that at Academy Park High School, we do offer African-American history. We also have a literature course related to African studies as well. But honestly, they are offered as electives. When are we ever going to get to the point where they are part of the majors? They're electives right now because we are still working on assimilating and assimilation. We've been doing that for years. We need to get to the point where everyone is represented, whether it's your gender, your religion, your race, where it's well balanced as far as what's being presented in the classroom. We still have our work as far as getting towards that direction.
So thank you, everyone on the panel, for your comments, and students, thank you for coming forward and telling us your stories. Tori, this is a great list of action items. I like the approach, the holistic approach, because when we think about systemic racism, we do have to think about it holistically, right? It's not just one thing that's going to help to fix it. We have to hit several areas. And you talked about mental health resources, social services, an equitably funded education system in Pennsylvania, hiring practices. All of these are pieces to the puzzle that are going to help change the situation for good. And one of the things that we're looking at the county level is looking at our Safe Schools initiative with the DA and how we can look at providing more mental health supports for our school districts and for our communities and for the students in our communities. So because we know that that's one of the issues that we have is that we don't have enough mental health supports. And a lot of problems that we have is that people aren't getting the supports that they need early enough. And so that's just one of the ways we're trying to help at the county level. But thank you, Tori, for looking at it so broadly and looking at all the issues that are involved in this.
Can I just jump in? It's Mary Gay. When Chris was talking, he was talking about his experience about being one of the few Black students in the gifted program and attending a white school and everything. In the past, I was on our local school board, and before that I worked at the Education Law Center of Pennsylvania. And for decades, we've had data to say that Black students are over-identified for special education and under-identified for gifted education. And who does the identification? It's supposed to be a collaboration between parents and educators. So it feels like, as we're looking at the holistic approach, there's a role for maybe some parent training to say you should be demanding this for your kids, and for some educator training when we're having this moment of moral clarity and people are actually listening to each other. Could we have some conversations and help with training with educators to say, hey, let's check your biases as we're doing evaluations of students, and what should you be looking at? Should this kid be in gifted? Should this, are you over-identifying a kid who shouldn't be in special ed. So maybe this national conversation we're having provides an opportunity for people to really hear and check and challenge bias.
I do want to move on to the next school, and that school will be Ridley High School. So I want to introduce Tanea. You may share your story now.
Hi everyone, my name is Tanea Henry. I attend Ridley High School and I'm also a rising senior. I've been in the Ridley School District since I was in kindergarten, and from that time I have seen many different racial incidences varying from like benign ignorance to outright violence. And I feel as though that a lot of that just stems from ignorance, because our school doesn't really discuss it as much as is probably necessary and beneficial. Like Chris, I have been in advanced classes and been one of the few students of color in advanced classes. I have been unfortunately looked at as one of the few students who could give that perspective from a Black person, and that has been a challenge. Even when our school does try to reach out to students of color, those attempts tend to fall flat. I remember in middle school when they attempted to do some Black history events on the morning announcements, one of the people who were highlighted was Michael Jackson. And unfortunately, they used a lot of pictures post his operation, to the point where some students literally came to me and was like, I didn't even know Michael Jackson was Black. And I said, that's not much of a surprise. And honestly, although I can also say that I've not been taught by any Black teachers, and I've only been taught by 2 teachers of color, I think that a lot of the issues with student-teacher relations stems from our inability to freely talk with our teachers. I've heard and I've seen students who were afraid to speak to their teachers because they would always be singled out and called out for disciplinary actions, even though when some of their white counterparts and peers would do similar actions, they would not be admonished. And even from I think a lot of that stems from just them being in lower level classes. I've been fortunate enough that over my school career, a lot of the biases that I have experienced before have kind of been alleviated, because a lot of teachers now know who I am and they know that I am a fairly remarkable student. But I constantly hear of other students being targeted by teachers, being targeted by some administrators for having a poor reputation, when a lot of that just stems from their inability to connect with the curriculum, being unable to connect with their teachers. And so that's why I think the main thing that our school really needs to do is have a school-wide discussion. I appreciate being able to have this time to talk, and all I ask is that my words are considered. Thank you.
Let's start with school administrators, if there are any who would like to respond to her.
Well, Tanea, no one should ever be singled out because of their reputation. It's no different than just being, pulled over because of profiling. So it's not right if students are being profiled and assumptions are being made with them. And you have a very good point in regards to engagement. There's a very good chance, in my opinion, that if the student was engaged with instruction and the curriculum, then perhaps the student will be more involved in the educational process rather than feel like an outsider, so to speak, and not feel like they have reached or not being part of being inclusion or not being included. So that should not be tolerated, and it's not acceptable for folks to be viewed in a negative way. We all know that the pipeline for discipline at times leads to going towards the penal system. And that's a very dangerous aspect when minority students are often disciplined at a different rate than other students. So thank you for sharing that, and it's a very good point in regards to people should not be singled out. The goal should be to have everyone feel inclusive.
Are there any other administrators or other officials who would like to respond to that before we move on to the next student?
Tanea, I'm Leanne Kruger. I'm state representative who represents the area where Ridley High School is, and my district office is on McDade Boulevard in Folsom. I just want to thank you for your words and to let you know how powerful student organizing can be. And I don't see any, I'm not aware of any students on the call from Penn Delco School District, but that school board has been in the news a lot lately because the president of the school board posted racist memes on Facebook. And he has been called out by the community. Every week, more and more students and graduates are joining their school board meetings. And while he hasn't yet resigned, that is the thing that the students and the alumni and parents are pushing for right now. And that wouldn't be possible without students speaking out. So I want to thank you for being here and for using your voice to share your experience.
Would one of our students from Academy Park like to speak? Either Kathleen or Sierra?
I would like to speak. So, hello everyone, I'm Kathleen Lack, and I attend Academy Park High School, and I am entering into my senior year. So I would like to thank the organizers who built this platform to allow students to speak on. So growing up as an Asian, I came to the realization that my race brings a set of privileges that unfortunately many Black students under this system does not have. So I am present here at this forum as an ally to those who are being oppressed. So there is a security guard at my high school, and she is very much known around the community and is cool with the kids. Every time I see her in the hall, she is comforting a student or just having a conversation, and she makes sure she greets every single one of the students she sees. So the problem here is that I am surprised. The effort that the security guard is putting in, like communicating to the students, learning our names, and supporting the student body, are traits that are rarely seen within officers, even with the ones who are present in our schools. The demand is that the police officers within these academic institutions must be required to put in efforts to be present in the community and schools. So a promise to protect a community is also a promise to be involved and know the people in the corresponding area. These changes can be made beginning with the officers present in the schools. So with these relationships built, we hope to work towards a more peaceful and binding community, and I hope this forum will lead to changes within the schools.
But any officials who would like to respond to what Kathleen has said?
First of all, I want to thank all the students for their bravery. It's not easy to jump on here with administrators, and frankly, in some instances, take your administrations on as far as to where they stand with race relations. In Kathleen's case, I couldn't agree more. Let the security guard be the example for all. That we need to be more involved with the kids, and we need to be more involved in our community. I still love Academy Park. I grew up in Sharon Hill, moved to Fallcroft, moved to College, spent a lot of time at Academy Park, and now I live in the Ridley School District. And today, I want to compliment you on your bravery. I know it can't be easy. Your situation can't be easy at all. And I just didn't want it to go without saying that I want to compliment the students on their bravery. Thank you very much.
We will be moving on to the student from Haverford.
Hi everyone. My name is Abia Numbisi. I just graduated from Haverford High School earlier 2 weeks ago, I think. I'm sorry, time is moving weirdly, as people might know. But the first time I realized that I was Black was when I started 5th grade. My family and I had just moved to Havertown, and before that I went to a predominantly Black school in Philly, where I hadn't yet grasped the concept of race, or that some people would and still see my Blackness as weird and other. It was the first day of school when my teachers and new classmates raved about a student in my class who had not yet returned from vacation. They barely knew me, let alone the type of person I would be friends with, but they were so insistent on saying that I would be like the best of friends with her. But when she did come back to class the next week, I knew from the moment she walked in that they assumed that we would be friends because we were both Black. Before that, I was the only Black girl in the class, and then she came in, and it was like a wake-up call for me. Like, she was Black and I was Black, and even the teachers in my school just assumed that we would get along because of that. There's this quote from one of my favorite novels called Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Edo-Lodge that says, if all racism was easy to spot, grasp, and denounce as what extremism is, the task of the anti-racist would be simple. Racism is a much greater problem than we're taught to recognize. For example, Black and brown people being spat on or insulted with slurs on the streets, or a white person burning down a Black-owned business. It's a much greater problem than people like to admit, and much harder to discern, especially when talking about our own community. When I started middle school, the kids in my class would miscall all of the Black girls. They called us by each other's names, claiming that they were just jokes or that we all looked alike. I felt like I was in constant competition with the other Black kids in my grade. I couldn't be too loud. I had to be extra nice, do the best work, keep my head down, but yet be the voice of Black culture. And it didn't stop with my peers. It extended to the teachers and administration. When back earlier when I said that my peers miscalled us, we tried to go to our teachers and administration, and they just kind of wrote us off as seeing us as the aggressive, angry Black girls. I have always been used as a token minority, asked to appear in front of the school board to talk about my experience at an extracurricular college readiness program that had no affiliation with my school, being used as the voice of reason or looked upon to speak about Black history in classes, even down to the fact that most of my teachers are scared to use the word Black when addressing students rather than African Americans, when many times I address the fact that as Cameroonian American, the term African American limits the complex identity of Black people in the US and around the world. We can't afford to preach multiculturalism, not when the results are just teaching people to be tolerant of others and hide their true feelings. We need to actively be anti-racist, especially when teaching teachers and staff about microaggressions in and out of the classroom. We need a diverse teacher and administrative workforce. 1 or 2 Black teachers is in no way diversity. And when I say that, I don't just mean the Delaware County community or Delco and all the schools in Delco. I also mean when I went to my predominantly Black school in elementary school, even the teachers there, they were all white. I can honestly say I've never had a teacher of color before. And it doesn't even just stop there. It's with our school curriculum, along with many curriculums across the country. What we learn is incredibly whitewashed. The history we learn, the novels we read, even the holidays and the cultural events that we celebrate. Combating racism includes a more diverse school curriculum, more author of color in English classes, starting at the elementary school level all the way to high school. So many of my English classes have centered around the idea and the works of classic authors, when in reality, that's just an excuse to discredit great author of color. In my 8 years of being in the Haverford School District, I can count only 2 teachers that brought in works by Black authors. We also need to reevaluate our history classes. For too long, we have been learning inaccurate and limiting history. It's not a coincidence that most non-Black Americans have never heard of Juneteenth. It is not a coincidence that the only Black role models that we learn are Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and W.E. Du Bois. It is not a coincidence that we don't learn how horrifically Indigenous people have suffered at the hands of the government and still suffer to this day. It is not a coincidence that so many people think that the 13th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 ended racism. It's because we see historical events as isolated incidents stuck in time, even though the things we learn in history class still affect the way we live today. And I did have a question for the panelists, but I think it was kind of addressed. So while everyone was talking, we were all kind of addressing the point that what we're seeing today isn't new. There have been protests for years, and and fights for change. And for a lot of the times that we see people actually actively changing, or like local politicians calling for change, it's like they give us a little bit and then it ends or it stops and we're all appeased by what they give us. So how can we keep the momentum going, and how can even like a politician's standpoint, what do you feel is your responsibility keeping the momentum going so that we can actually effectively enact change? Thank you.
Can I jump in? I mean, I think continuing to make the demands. Petitions aren't the way to do it. Petitions are a way to get your email so people can send you notices rather than the other way around. Writing to your representatives, calling your representatives, emailing your representatives, and above all else, voting. That is the ultimate way to keep people accountable. So if you're not 18 yet, helping to register people to vote, but then actually going out and voting, because that's the part where people fall down and they complain, but then they don't actually go to the polling place. We've seen so many elections in our area come down to just a few votes. So that's the ultimate way to make sure that progress actually continues and that people don't just get put off with, oh yeah, I did X, but that's it, I'm not going to do anything else. So that would be my suggestion.
And I don't want to mispronounce the young lady's name, but your story resonates with me. When I was in the 6th grade, my family moved from West Oak Lane, which is a section in Philadelphia, to a community called Roslyn, Pennsylvania. And then all of a sudden, I was the only Black child in the classroom in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. It was a huge culture shock to me. And moving from Philadelphia, in the school I was attending in Philadelphia, I was one of the brightest and best students in the classroom. And because of the timing of the transition during like the month of February, March, it was an uphill climb for me to catch up academically with where my new school location was. But it was very challenging assimilating in that situation and going from one extreme situation to another as far as demographics in the school setting. And quite honestly, when I got to high school, I kind of lost my mind because there was more African-American students at that time, and I was focusing more on the social aspect rather than learning. So thank you for sharing that, because that can be very challenging in regards to being the only Black child in a classroom and, feeling out of place and so forth and things along those lines. And I would be remiss not to respond to one of my students, Kathleen Lack. Thank you for joining today, Kathleen. Now, Kathleen, thank you for sharing your experience with the security officer. And that could be a delicate balance, because we have our security officers to encourage students to get out of the hallways and make sure you're going to class. So thank you for sharing that, because that gives me a different perspective on appreciating the rapport and the relationships that the security officers are trying to build, rather than always, your face and telling you what you're doing wrong, as opposed to building up the relationship and the rapport.
This is Senator Tim Carney. I just wanted to jump in to talk about why now is different than it has been in the past. I agree completely with what other people have said, in particular with what my colleague Senator Williams is saying. This isn't new. What is new is that it's happening right now during a pandemic, and the pandemic has put magnifying glasses over top of the inequities that exist in our society. And thankfully, young people are the ones who are doing most of the standing up and the yelling and the screaming and the demands that are being made. And I want you to keep that up. Abia, your question was, how do we keep up this conversation? How do we do it so it actually makes a real difference? I can tell you it's starting to make a real difference. I think that the laws that got passed in Harrisburg this week around the responsibility of the police and the way that policing is done are something that never would have been done a year ago or 2 years ago. We're having difficult conversations in Harrisburg about things like, for example, Act 111, which controls the way police contracts are done. That was like the third rail of politics until now, until this conversation is happening. And we're pushing on, and this goes back to what Tori was saying earlier, we're fighting for funding. Pennsylvania is 48th in the country in terms of equity in funding its public school systems. That's just not, it's not acceptable. And we need to keep up. And trust me, it helps our arguments in Harrisburg when we can point back to our districts and point to activists, young activists like all you high school students who are here today speaking to us and speaking the truth to power. That helps us try to move things forward and actually make things happen. This is a time like we've never seen in our history. I'm an old white guy. I consider myself an ally, and I've become an ally really in the last, I think, 5 or 10 years of my life as the more I've gotten involved in public service. And the question I always ask my colleagues in Harrisburg was, how do you define the word fair? And that's something that, I mean, it may sound silly, but I shake my head continually. We have a fair funding formula. Last year, 10% of the education money went through the fair funding formula. That would have meant, millions of dollars more for the Upper Darby School District, for example, if all the money had gone through the fair funding formula. So keep doing this, keep it up. And, Mary Gay's right. Talk to your legislators, talk to people, make sure your stories are heard, because we can use those stories as leverage when we're having these arguments back in Harrisburg. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Carney. We do have to move on to the next students. Sierra Coleman, also of Academy Park High School.
Hello, my name is Sierra Coleman, and I'm from Academy Park High School. I'm an upcoming senior. I'm moving into 12th grade. And I would like to say thank you, everyone, for inviting me and my friend to the forum. I really do appreciate it, being here to speak our piece and to get to talk to legislative. So my experience, I'm really happy to go to Academy Park High School, a place where it is predominantly Black. So I see a lot of people that look like me. And but I feel as though where we fail is that there is an amount of racism that has stricken the world. And I think it's safe to say that as people, we can make changes across the world, but before we can start with the world, we have to begin in our own communities. We first have to talk to our lawmakers and city board members and our governors. Racism is a disease that has stricken our nation, and if we want to change it, we have to start small. There should be open communication with our police and lawmakers. The community should be benefiting. Funding should go to the schools and community centers, not to keep the police in schools. Racism is a big fight. We're starting small, and keep pushing is the only way to change it. And I feel as though doing something like this is how we start. And going to a school like Academy Park, I feel as though on the daily, I don't see racism and I don't experience it personally. But when we're allowed to go and do different opportunities, I'm lucky enough to be in honors classes, and my leadership has brought me to other conferences that I've invited to with one of our programs called Rising Scholars, and there we get to meet a ton of other schools, and we get to talk about different issues, and we do certain sessions. And a lot of people who I meet there always ask, oh, where are you from? And I always say Academy Park, and they always have this look on their face like, oh, you're from Academy Park. So I feel as though racism for me, it's there, it's always there. We've had a few incidences in our school, but it's always when you meet different people who don't experience what you experience every day are kind of shocked. And then they're like, oh, well, you go to a school like this. Yes, our school isn't the best, but it is our school. So I feel as though if we want to change anything, we have to change our community and our schools and give power and money back into our schools and communities before we can start big. Thank you.
Thank you, Sierra. Before I open up to comments from others, I would like to bring people's attention to, in the Q&A section, there have been some questions submitted by Kayla's and my friend Damien, who has been very gracious to help us with some of the planning stages in here, though he's not hosting. So if panelists would like to go into the Q&A, answer some of those questions, and that would be much appreciated. We had plans to ask them during the forum, but as we've seen, the students and the responses to them have gone along than expected, which is good. This is a good conversation to have. We may try to organize a second forum at a later date to have questions asked directly, but for today, if you would like to, feel free to answer those questions. So are there officials, school admin or elected or law enforcement who would like to address what Sierra has said?
This is Senator Williams. And I want to comment on the last young lady because she said a lot of things succinctly and profoundly, and that is to be a Black person who is looked upon in a community as an answer to all the issues. And frankly, one of the things that has to happen in these conversations is that while all of us have a perspective, and certainly African Americans have a perspective, and Black folks have a perspective, that's in the definition of human beings in our own experience. And I think she said it quite effectively. Like when she came from Philadelphia, went to another school, people looked to her for all these answers, which at a young age is very challenging, and even probably now. But the greatest point I want to remind her is that, you know, your life's journey will be your advocacy. Voting is important, but voting without definition is tragic. And I want you to be very clear. You are very, very, very thoughtful about the issues that you say are important to your community. No one's going to be able to say it like you from your community. And today's politics, there are a lot of people who carry banners and are very considerate. But you have some very distinct things that you need to make sure you're clear about. So voting is part of it, but giving definition and life to it. And you have to be consistent over years to do this. And I'm grateful that there's a new generation picking up the work that came from the civil rights movement, as those in the civil rights movement picked up the work from W.E. Du Bois and Frederick Douglass. It's a continuum of Black people in this country since slavery that we have that responsibility. And so there is no simple answer to your question, but it is a profound and very important one. And that is, how do we take this moment in a movement to define what it means for fairness for Black people as compared to all human beings? And that's pretty complicated because it will have a range of comments on it, but I want to tell you, you're starting early enough, and you really are very insightful to sort of give us some guideposts, those of us who are in elective office, about what that means at a school district, in policing, social justice, including, you know, being a part in a law firm or being a doctor. Wherever that space is that we have to advocate and give distinction to, that's our collective responsibility. And it will be a life journey, not just one moment in time.
Sierra, essentially you were speaking to stereotypes and profiling and people prejudging and making judgments. When you think of the word prejudice, within that word is basically prejudge. And if we're going to have open and honest conversations, I don't think there's anyone who can say they don't prejudge people when they meet them, where they see them. It could be, you could judge somebody based on a bald head, long hair, glasses, no glasses, tall, short, bigger, smaller. We all tend to judge people based on what you see at times or what you hear about them. So Sierra, you have a very good point in regard to that, and that does take place, and that's something that, you know, needs to stop. When it comes uncomfortable is at least to going towards racism, when someone holds some form of power over you, whether it's physically, whether it's emotional, economics, and things along those lines. So people just need to acknowledge and realize that, hey, we all may have preconceived ideas, perceptions, prejudices against folks. And I don't mean that in a racist way. I'm just saying often we judge each other by physical appearance and what we think we know about another individual. And Sierra, excellent job. A little inside joke here. If you've heard of the group Public Enemy, always call Sierra Sister Soldier, because she brings the fire in regards to, you know, her thoughts and perspective when it comes to equality for all.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Are there any law enforcement officers that would like to respond to, well, anything that's been said so far? Of course, you can speak up later. For now, we will be moving on to student from Marple Newtown, Inaya.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nishada Thomasell. I appreciate this opportunity to speak about my experiences as a Black student in Garnet Valley School District. I'm honored to be here, although I just found out last night that I had to prepare these remarks. I'm with you today because the president of our HERSA, the Humanity and Ethnicity, Race, and Equality organization, could not make it. I've been a student in Garnet Valley since kindergarten, and I am now a rising junior. Although I've had many positive experiences here, I have also had some that have been disappointing and upsetting. 2 years ago, a student in our high school posted on social media a photo of a Confederate flag and stated that Martin Luther King Day was an N-word holiday, but he actually used the N-I-G-G-E-R word. Many students, black and white, were very concerned that a student in our school district was not afraid of any consequences for making this racist post. For many of us, this was a turning point in our school district. We also have a lack of diversity in the teaching staff and administration. In my 11 years of being in the Garnet Valley School District, I've only had 2 black teachers and 0 black male teachers, and the rest of my teachers have been white. What I can say about this is that representation matters. When you are almost always taught by someone who does not look like you and are in a class with people who do not look like you, it makes you feel like you do not belong. Knowing that I have only been taught by 2 black teachers in my whole academic career makes me feel underrepresented and alone. Although many of the white teachers that I've had have been amazing, students of color would definitely benefit from more diversity in the teaching staff. Finally, we have a large problem in our middle and high school with students that use the N-word in the presence of black students and even in the presence of staff members. I've heard quite a few students complain about this problem, and this is something that we would like to see addressed in our school district. Based on these experiences that I've shared, here are my suggestions of actions that the school can take to better impact the community. Firstly, we need a required African American history course for all students. Here Club had a meeting last week with the administration, and we discussed ways we can adjust the curriculum in order to better represent the Black community, and I think this is a great way to do so. Next, we need to increase the number of Black teachers and administrators in our community to better represent the students as well, so that they have somebody to talk to and someone that they can relate to in their struggle. And consequently, we need a Black student union, Black student coalition advised by a Black teacher or staff member. And lastly, we need a zero tolerance policy on the use of the N-word and other racial slurs and serious disciplinary actions taken when those procedures are violated. In closing, I would like to pose this question. Is the Garnet Valley School District willing to publicly state that Black Lives Matter in the Garnet Valley School District? In addition, will the district stand in solidarity with their Black students and other students of color? Thank you for listening today.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. If anyone would like to answer her question or talk about the actions that she so rightfully stated that her school needs, now is the time to do so.
I will take this since it's most applicable to me. So first of all, let me start off in the shade by saying great job as always. And when we talked about the lives of our Black students and Black community members and Black individuals across America, of course, you know, your life matters, their lives matter. And I think that's easy to kind of say. In terms of some of the suggestions, obviously the curriculum question is a much deeper conversation, not deeper, but a more complex conversation in terms of, you know, to propose new courses. It goes through a very extensive process, which we would have to adhere to. But that's something I'm sure the district would be something that they would look at. You know, the Black student union that you suggested. Yeah, I mean, kids start clubs all the time. I think here a couple years ago, that's kind of how here started. All right. But if you want something that's more specific to Black students, absolutely. You know, you just got to propose it. As far as finding an advisor that is Black, it's a little bit more difficult. As you know, you kind of hit the nail right on the head. We do not have a very diverse staff. So that would limit, you know, the sponsorship of the club. But again, you know, that's something that we could work towards. I'm trying to hit everything. I think I hit everything. Is there something I missed, Nishada?
No.
Okay. All right, honey. All right. And again, I think the most important thing, and I'll say this to you, Nishada, but also to our HERE club members, the most important thing is for us to kind of have that continuous dialogue. All right. And kind of keep the lines of communication open. All right. I know that you kind of talked about a lot of the, you know, experiences that the kids have with encountering the N-word. And we just need to, you know, continue to reinforce for our students to make sure that that's reported. You know, a lot of times, you know, kids, you know, unfortunately, or you know, choose to ignore it, or they just don't let it get to them. All right, and again, we need people, you know, speaking up and kind of letting us know when those incidents happen, so we can hold them accountable. You are right that heinous incident from a couple years ago did spark a lot of positive, you know, outcomes for us. We started our global citizenship committee in the district, and really started looking at race, ethnicity, and other areas of inequality. So although that was an unflattering and horrible, you know, event in our recent history for Garnet Valley, you know, that hopefully, you know, some positive came out of it, and some positive will continue to come out of things that are going on.
We would like to move on to Miriam, who is also a Marple Newtown student.
I'm an upcoming junior. Over my past 3 years at Marple Newtown, it is a predominantly white school. I've witnessed a lot of racial injustice, not only to me, but to my friends and my sister. My school has less than 100 Black students and no Black teachers. The only Black staff members work in maintenance. During Black History Month, there's no attention brought to it by the school, and we don't even talk about it in history class. Not even one day is put aside to talk about anyone or anything related to the topic. Many of the students only know and learn about slavery and lack knowledge about the other parts of history involving Black people. It is very common to hear a non-Black student using the N-word. However, as one of the few Black students, it is sometimes hard and overwhelming to speak up about it because we are overpowered and seen as problematic. Although the school tries to make it a very welcoming environment for everyone, it's not, especially for Black students and other minorities. Last school year, a student told me that my hair looked like a bird's nest because it was curly and bigger than he was used to. In addition, another student who was in another grade once asked me if he could play me in rock, paper, scissors, shoot, and said that if he won, he could touch my hair. My friend was once asked by a girl if she could cut her braid and put it in the parking lot. I constantly get ignorant questions about my hair and questions about other stereotypes that he expects us to be a part of. I would just like to find a way to make a change and help people like myself feel welcome and comfortable going to school every day.
This is State Rep Joanna McClinton. May I respond, Charles?
Of course.
Miriam, thank you for sharing your, I don't want to say story, but some really negative experiences that don't make you feel like a human, make you feel very disrespected, and certainly diminish your capacity and have you perhaps at times question your value, your worth, whether you belong. And I serve both Yeadon and Darby Borough, and I'm so very proud of all the students putting this together, Kayla, Tori, Charles, all of you. This is tremendous. And don't think we're just listening. What you're doing is setting into motion a continuous conversation. Even the folks who are logging off are saying they want to do this again and continue to work on changing the culture and the environment at your schools. And myself, having gone to Black schools as a child, the things you all are describing, I don't know how I would react at 14, 15. But I'll tell you, at 37, being one of 8 Black women in the Pennsylvania legislature, both in the House and in the Senate, that's 253 statewide, only 8 women that look like you and I, Miriam. I haven't heard comments as bad as that, but I've had reactions that are similar. All sorts of commentary. Oh, it's long, it's short, it's curly, it's that. Oh, those little twists, where do they come from? Why do you have to wear it like that? I mean, the unsolicited comments and feedback, it just is very disrespectful. It's not appropriate. And I just am sharing that because I want you to know that unfortunately, even people who are, you know, elected by 30 and 40,000 of their neighbors come up with these same ignorant comments. So don't get tired of confronting it. Don't get tired of saying it's not right. And I know for myself, I'm not laughing these things off, but I am letting people know, you know, do I make a comment on how you wear your hair and have I made you feel uncomfortable? And did I ask you? whether you liked my short twists or not. I mean, we have to stand up for ourselves, specifically as Black women, and make sure that we are letting other people know, not, oh, we feel uncomfortable, but what you're doing should be making you uncomfortable. Thank you.
Miriam, I want to thank you, and I want to offer, so I am the state rep that covers Marple Newtown, and I got there in November of 2018, so I haven't been there for a long time, but I have heard some stories like this from your school, and unfortunately, I didn't really know any students to reach out to try to connect so we could try to address it together. But now that you're on here, I'm going to send you my information, and I'm offering that maybe you and a couple other students and I could meet and talk about something that I could try to help take to Marple Newtown superintendent or school board on with you, and help you feel more comfortable doing that. So I'm going to send you my information, and hopefully we can connect. But thank you for sharing. I know it's really difficult, but sharing helps people like me figure out what's going on so we can try to address it. So I just want to thank you for sharing your, like Joanna said, negative experience.
Thank you, Representative Amara. We are getting towards the end of what had been originally scheduled at the end of the call. I believe my original intention was 2:45. We are getting close to the last of the students. I believe we just have Anaya.
Thank you very much for sharing your story, and I know the audio is no fault of your own. If anyone, I know it was probably very hard to hear, but if anyone heard anything that they would like to make a statement on, now is the time to do so before I read our final student's story.
I want to comment again, and I'll be brief in case any of my other legislators or fellow legislators want to say anything. Anaya, I'm so sorry about what happened at school and how it has made you feel. And I know that you, Miriam, must be friendly enough that you are connected here to do this. So I offer the same thing I said to Miriam, and I've already messaged her. I would love to connect with you both and any of the other friends that you have so we can have a discussion, and then we can ask the superintendent or someone on the school board to have a discussion with you because, and maybe some of your teachers as well. I have some relationships with the teachers at Marple Newtown. I think this is a unique opportunity for us, for you all who are already organized to use your voice, to take it to the people who are in charge again, and we can do what we can to make some changes at school. And I just want to say again that I'm really, really sorry for the experiences that you've had. School should be a place that everyone goes to and feels good about, and that's something that we can work on together.
if I could just say something briefly too. We spent a lot of time today talking about a lot of the issues that our high school students are dealing with and are facing. But looking at from the educational lens, these issues start for kids in the early years of education. Currently, again, I'm an assistant principal at Strathaven High School, but I spent 9 years as assistant principal at our middle school, and I had rising fifth graders who came to us with preconceived notions, established ideas, quite frankly, that were wrong at such an early age. And we have to spend some time, really focusing on our students in the early years to, educate them in the right way, because our kids are just so overexposed today. They're just so overexposed with social media, and they're developing the wrong ideas at early ages. So again, I really appreciate all the students sharing their stories. I learned a lot as a school administrator today, and again, I'm thankful and hopeful for change.
Thank you, Dr. Matsanka. I believe we can now move on to the last student, which is Faith MC.
For the sake of time, I will not go into grave detail about a traumatic event I had in my local Wawa. When I was in 8th grade, I went out with my 3 other white friends and was accused of stealing a 95-cent donut. For all the Springfield staff that know me, this is completely not in my character whatsoever. When the manager asked me for a receipt, I told the man the lady at the register had not given me one. I insisted he check his cameras, and he denied my plea. I called my mother, who then asked them to check the cameras, and when it showed I had been truthful, they apologized with a $10 gift card. That is the first time I had experienced racism in my predominantly white community. Hello everyone, my name is Faith Dempsey, and I attend Springfield High School, and I am entering 11th grade. In light of recent events, the conversation of the Black Lives Matter movement has been a catalyst for fighting the injustice that Black men and women face not only in their everyday life, but in their educational career as well. I'm here today to urge you into changing the way Black children are treated in the public school system, and also to urge you to change the things that they are being taught in the public school system. As an African American girl, my mother has given me the privilege of learning, discovering, and ingesting the culture and the heritage of African Americans. As an American, I have been taught by my teachers the history of our great country and the men and women who have contributed to this nation. I have been in Springfield since I was 3 years old, and I have been taught about the great MLK, the courageous Rosa Parks, and the brave Harriet Tubman. I was never taught about the innocence of Emmett Till, the determination of Little Rock Nine, and the pain and suffering that Black men and women face 400 years ago all the way to 2020, or better yet, Black history prior to slavery. I was never taught about the pain and suffering, but I have lived it and I have watched it. I watched it with Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and so many others. I was never taught about Black royalty and warriors like those of the Ashanti Kingdom, which would build pride and foster respect amongst all who hear about them. I don't want to sit in a classroom with peers when all they know about Black history is slavery. The psychological effects are evident when one believes that this is their only roots. Teach about Black academia, African history before slavery, and its accomplishments in architecture, medicine, math, and so on. I look at my 8-month-old brother and think, when will he be seen as a threat? And when will he experience his first racial derogatory comment? And will this happen in a place where he's supposed to feel safe, like school? Schools have so much power in the way students will live their lives after their educational careers. They say it takes a village, and I know we can all agree that schools are a great part of that village. Representation is important for students. We must have Black representation in our schools. The famous civil rights activists will not suffice. We need more African American teachers who can be an inspiration for the Black youth and be a guide to the white youth about what their fellow Black peers face in society. If we need to go out of our way to hire more Black staff, let's do it. So what I ask today is that you take a look at your curriculum from language arts classes all the way down to art classes. Reading more books by Black authors with Black characters, playing music not just by Mozart, but music by William Still, and not just doing this for the month of February, but every day for years to come. For when we promote a well-faceted account of Black history, we also promote pride, respect, and tolerance amongst all Americans. For when we teach all aspects, we foster thought-provoking minds, we foster the belief in equality, and thereby embrace diversity and tolerance. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith. If any officials of any kind would like to respond to what Faith has said, and now would be the time.
Just real quick, Faith, continue reading and learning and finding out more. And I'm not sure if I had to step out for a minute, but continue doing your research. The first African Americans to get to the Americas were not slaves. They came as indentured servitudes, just as many people from of Europe. So continue that studying, and you will find a rich history. There was a lot about us other than just slavery, of course.
Joe Hepp, I'm the principal of Springfield High School. I'm very honored to know Faith and to be able to interact with Faith on a daily basis in our school, and to hear her story of what happened to her at the local Wawa is appalling to me. And I can certainly understand the huge impact that's had on Faith and how she feels she's viewed by this community and also in this school. But Faith, I do want to applaud you, and I want to thank you for rising above that, because you are one of our what I believe to be one of our most outspoken students in this building, not only for for the Black community, but students as a whole. And you truly are a great representative of everything that students who take initiative and who strive to be the best that they can be, and beyond that, you're a wonderful example of how an individual can meet with wonderful accomplishments. So it's sad that event had to happen to you, but I am very very pleased to hear and to know that you have not let that affect or waver your spirit and accomplishment. So, I do want to say, Faith, that there have been some efforts in the past few years to make some adjustments to our curriculum, and some of them are going to be coming to light this year, especially through our honors language arts curriculum. There have been efforts to introduce a greater level of diversity into our programming. The history aspect that you spoke of, I feel as though needs a much closer look, as you have clearly articulated here today, that students, our non-Black students, and even maybe some of our Black students would benefit greatly from knowing that there are prominent members of the Black community who have had wonderful impacts in development of not only this country but others as well. So I definitely will take that to Dr. Barber and Dr. Zweiback as our superintendent and director of curriculum to further those conversations and discussions about how we can expand those offerings and expand that input into our curriculum. So and Faith, I know you're not going to sit on the sidelines, and as you enter into your junior year, I foresee you being a very strong representative of the students in this building, and students of all walks of life and races and ethnicities. I look forward to working closely with you as we continue to have conversations with our student organizations and things that we can do to start off the school year to address these things that are happening not only in our own towns but globally and across the country. So I'm very proud of you and all that you've done and all that you do and all that you stand for. And you are what makes Springfield High School, I think, better than it has been in years past. And you're going to be a key character in making it better for students down the road, especially your little brother there. So just applaud you for your time and stepping out today and speaking your voice. And your voice has not gone unheard, and will definitely look forward to working with you to make some of those things a reality.
Thank you. Due to time, we're going to go on to Tahira Johnson, who'll be reading a poem. We had wanted her to be one of the ones opening up this, but due to technical issues, we had to hold her off, but we very much want her words to be heard, if possible. So I pass it off to Tahira.
Good afternoon, everybody. From what I've heard from the students, everything has been great that you guys are speaking up for yourselves, and a little makes me a little bit sad because one of the reasons that I'm a teacher, I'm a special education teacher in New York. And one of the reasons I became a teacher is because of my experiences with racism growing up in school and outside of school. And so I think that it's very important to see more representation of ourselves. And I think from my experience, many of my students have felt a sense of hope. And they were really surprised to have a Black teacher, a lot of my students. And I can relate to a lot of their experiences that they share, as well as many that you have shared. So I'm gonna read my poem. It's called Black Threat. Before I was even aware that racism was there, people thought I was a threat and filled themselves with fear. There were preconceived notions of who I would become and how dangerous I would be before I was even here. People are scared of my people, but we're the ones being shot down by the people that we scare. I realized at a young age that the world I lived in didn't seem to like me or care. When all I saw in the news was Black women and men killed here and there, especially when I found out that Black kids also get shot down everywhere. Every time I hear or see these stories, I shed a tear. And the first time I found out that I was a threat was when I was stopped by the police because I looked suspicious as a teenager walking through somewhere. There were people who hated my existence before I was ever aware. Can someone explain why so many racists call me a nigger as a child and give me strange stares? Or why I was called one at work for doing my job because of how I appeared? Why can I count more times than my fingers can count that a racist filled me with fear? Can someone tell me if it's safe for me to be Black anywhere? Or at what age will the fear of Black children being a threat lead to their end of their being? Because I wonder every day if my colored students or young relatives will die like the other unarmed Black people I keep seeing. Or if the day I get stopped by a racist cop for being Black leads to the day that I stop breathing. When will hatred end because it is not safe for my people to exist? I'm tired of saying goodbye to the people that mattered and that will be missed. So until my people stop dying, I will keep their names alive with my voice and throw up my fist. To you students, I'd say just keep using your voice and speaking up. I just attended a peaceful protest, students and teachers against racism in New York about a week ago. And it was a great experience. A lot of the kids were with their teachers and a few principals attended. And there were some changes made. So your voice matters. And, you know, sometimes we are the change. So maybe, you know, if anybody is thinking about it, becoming a teacher is a great thing too.
Thank you, Tahira. We have just one more thing in this. That is a prayer from Representative McClinton. This has all been an honor of mine to facilitate all of this. I can't take credit for most of it. I might have been doing a lot of the talking and bringing things through here, but this was Kayla's idea. Kayla was the one who coordinated me. She kept me on task. And I can't take credit for the idea of it and the vision that she had for what this would look like. And admittedly, neither of us thought that it would get to this scale. So I am very proud to have been part of the group that planned this. I'm very proud to have been part of this event, and I look forward to any future events that might be held. I look forward to seeing the effects of this conversation and all conversations ongoing as things progress at every level, at local municipalities and schools and police departments, at the county, at the state, and the nation, in the world, and of course, at the individual. So again, thank you all for being here, and I'll pass it off to Ms. McClinton.
Thank you again, Kayla. What a vision. This has been profound. I was off camera in my car and got on my laptop thanks to my colleague, Leanne, for sending me the other link so that I could have the camera access. But before I pray, this is for Miss Tahira. Yes, sis, that was powerful. And Faith, you as well. I was snapping. I didn't want to unmute, but everything everyone has said has just been, so honest and straightforward. I mean, vulnerable. All of you have been so vulnerable. So I'm just going to close in prayer because I'm not supposed to speak. Lord, I thank you for this day that you have made. We are grateful for life. We're grateful for strength. And Lord, although 30 days ago today, our brother George died and was killed brutally, and notwithstanding the horror and pain of that moment and a sight that we've seen so many times, I'm so grateful for these young people who are stepping up like never before. They were already working hard, representing, showing people a better path towards equality and justice, but certainly between Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, all of us have just really been convicted on another level to do more and to be more righteous and to be more straightforward. You told us in your word that we should walk humbly, love mercy, and pursue justice. So I thank you for all of the folks who are on this call, for every student that not testified, but just spoke straightforwardly what's on their heart. They're carrying heavy burdens that young people should not have to carry, but because of this world and the hatred being abound and so deeply rooted into the fabric of our nation, they're dealing with this even in school. So I pray that you would lift these burdens, give us the strength to just not endure, but to also march on until we have victory. We know it's your plan for us to all live in peace together, to all live in harmony together. So Father, even if we have the responsibility of being the ones to be the light in so much darkness, we'll depend on your grace and your strength to get us there. And we thank you, Lord, for even this opportunity to come together wherever we are, all across Delaware County, looking at our school boards and our districts and what needs to be done. Let us be intentional and strategic about recruiting high school students into education, and of course, to get those who graduated from college to work in these schools and in these departments and interact with our youth so it can be more positive and more impactful. And anyone who's dealing with hurt and pain from the ugly face of racism, I pray for healing and I pray for the strength to get up and to move forward. We thank you and we give your name the praise. And as my faith tradition dictates, I pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you very much, Rep. Jojo, for that prayer. Thank you so much, everyone who was able to really contribute to my vision of coming together as a community, and really sharing what needs to be done. I know there's many school administrators and politicians and people in the community who turn away when they hear the word protest. So let's have these conversations face to face as much as we can, and let's hear each other's voices, maybe not screams, but let's organize together and work together, and we will make a brighter future for all lives.